So hello and welcome to Epic Geeks. Today I have with me Christian Fonnesbech. Hello Christian.
Hello.
Firstly, thank you for taking the time to come and talk with me here on Epic Geeks, and congratulations firstly on Cloud Chamber. It's such a different game or different concept of gameplay to what many people might be used to. So can you just first start off by giving us a brief description of what Cloud Chamber is all about?
Well, Cloud Chamber we call it a massively multiplayer story game. Mm-hmm. And basically what you do is you go into a 3D WikiLeaks, like a database.
Yeah.
And somebody has uploaded 150 media files to it. So that's found footage and diaries and emails and even some space documentary footage. And it's all about this mysterious event that happened around the Peterson Institute. Mm-hmm. And your job is to go in there and figure out what happened by watching the film fragments and reading the diaries and so on. But the really new thing is that the gameplay is mostly about discussing what you find. So you're navigating these 3D data landscapes to find the media files, and then you're discussing with the other users, like on Reddit or Facebook, what happened. Mm-hmm. Is she lying? Who killed this character? What is the signal? And so on. Okay.
You described Cloud Chamber as a massively multiplayer story game. So narrative and is quite important within the game, and also how players interact with each other to work out that story. Can you explain how players interact with each other within the game?
Well, it's very simple. They post threads and they comment on them and they like them or dislike them. So they're basically anybody in the game can start a thread. So I think she's lying in this scene, or what's inside that mysterious box, and does anybody have an idea of what the signal is? And then anybody else can comment on it. So threads get voted up or down according to what the other players think of them. Mm-hmm. So it's really like a crowdsourced investigation where you're playing yourself and where the other players are basically the ones judging how well you're doing. So the core gameplay is really about contributing to the investigation.
Okay. So although the key elements of the story within the game are provided by you with video footage and audio and written word, is that right? The players can kind of discuss that together and investigate how they think what's happening within the game.
Exactly. If you think of it a little bit like when JFK was killed, for example, There was all different kinds of media footage. There was the Zapruder film, there were newspaper articles, there was interviews with people, diaries and so on. If you had access to all those in one place and you were trying to figure out exactly what happened, that's what this is like. Except here we have three young people, Jeff and Anthony, who played Renly Baratheon in Game of Thrones, and Gwilym Lee from Midsummer Murders, and Sarah Yort. And they play three young people who discover that a signal from another world has possibly been kept secret for 30 or 40 years. So you're basically piecing together what's happening to these young people through the films they left behind, but also what happened 40 years ago through texts and diaries and scientific journals and so on.
So there's more there's sort of two storylines going on then together?
Well, there's probably more like five. Okay. There's a lot of different time layers, and one of the big challenges is figuring out what happened when, and which order should things be in, because the database has been jumbled. Something has gone wrong inside the database. It's almost as if whatever it is they're playing with has gotten into the database. So it was supposed to be just normal landscapes, but something is warping it, and it's becoming very spacey. And at the same time as you're putting together these 3 or 4 different time layers of the young people and one of them's mother and so on, you're actually finding documentary clips that the characters also left behind. So while you're discovering what the characters are discovering, what could or could not be a signal inside of subatomic particles, you're also finding documentary clips taking you from the smallest particles to the surface of the Earth to the magnetosphere, out to the galaxy, and all the way back to the birth of the universe. So there's both a journey into the story and the characters, and also one into space.
It's a very, very fascinating concept to me. I mean, I love any kind of investigative. If I told you what I did sort of in my day job. I am actually an investigator.
Really?
yeah. So this
Wow.
kind of game, it's just right up my street. So it is such a unique concept for a game as such. Why did you decide to go down that route of storytelling as opposed to the normal kind of FPS RPG kind of gameplay?
Well, I think the FPS RPG thing has. I mean, RPGs are nice. I love them. I played them. I played at FPSs and so on. But I think a lot of them tend to get stuck in this sort of story here, gameplay here, and you switch from one to the other. So, you know, the old saying that it's a corridor shooter with story wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get tired of that, I think. I think the story should be the game.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be an add-on to the game. And the game shouldn't be an add-on to the story. They should be one. Mm-hmm. The gameplay should be about the story. And I've really been struggling with that for 10 years with my teams. And we've done 30, 35 projects, and we've always aimed for this. And then one day in I think, 2006, we quite simply discovered that if we put these mysterious film clips inside a closed social network and gave people points for discussing them, people would just stay in there for hours and they would get very emotionally involved. And I think that's one of the big challenges for computer games is the emotional involvement. Because, you know, the adrenaline bit really works very well and the puzzle bit really works very well, but none of those are very emotional.
Yeah.
So when we discovered the multiplayer aspect that, you know, the chatting like you do on Facebook or Reddit, that could actually work in investigating, we actually think we found the key, or one of the big keys to how do you make stories become the game. And that's really what this is. The game is about figuring out what happened. So then the next big question is, what's the reward system? Because are you going to have, like, you know, puzzle gates where you have to type in the right number to progress, or you have to have the answer to a puzzle? But that, again, that's not emotional. That's not a story. That's a story blocker. But the answer was really very obvious because we did the first one in 2006. That was just before Facebook came out. And when we got to make the second one, Facebook was out and likes had invented. And it was like, oh, right, the points should come from the other users. That seems obvious. So Cloud Chamber is actually the fourth one we've made since 2006. So it's, you know, it's been an evolution for us. Yeah. It's not been born straight from the head of Zeus.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of progressed nicely then through your other games. What was your inspiration then behind the story and this kind of gameplay? Is it come from anywhere else, any kind of particular film or story?
Well, actually, it came from my family. Mm-hmm. My parents are both biologists, and I was raised with science and completely without God. My parents raised me for this, you know, this completely rational way of looking at the world, where humanity is like a microbe living on a rock, orbiting an unstable gas explosion. You know, the really rationalistic way of looking at the world. And there's no God, and there's no other life out there. So you're alone, deal with it. And I grew up with that, and at the same time I could see that my grandparents, for example, were extremely religious. So I sort of grew up in this tension between there's somebody looking out for you and there's nobody looking out for you. But, you know, when you're raised completely rationally, it's really difficult to believe, even if you want to believe, because it just doesn't make sense to you, angels and stuff. So when we started making Cloud Chamber, we got an artistic funding. And that basically meant that we were allowed to do whatever we wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I've never had that chance before. I've made 35 projects, and that was the first time anybody said to me, so what do you think it should be about? And my first thought was that it should be about growing up in a family of scientists. And my second thought was, we need a science aspect, because one of the things we figured out in these three other mysteries was that once you have science in there, real science, it becomes much easier to role play because suddenly it feels real instead of just being, a constructed drama with 5 characters, blah, blah, blah. If you put real science in there, suddenly the playing field for role playing is endless. And that led me to thinking about space, because what is the universe? Most of us, including me, just don't know what's beyond Jupiter. We know there's the sun, and then there's the Earth, and then there's some other planets. We got Jupiter, but beyond that, it's just weird. So I really thought that it would be great to create a journey where we took the users from the smallest particles to the end of the universe, and it would be great for me too to explore that. And once we started on it, I kind of realized that it was also kind of this whole search about, are we alone? Because you can't really look out into the universe without wondering, is there something else out there? And that ties back to God, I think, because that whole idea of, are we alone? Are we at the center of everything? Or are we completely, non-important in an endlessly huge universe?
It's like you start a conversation and it all comes back round again to the original question. Yeah.
And what I also noticed was I was part of this science forum online. And what I noticed was the enormous interest there was in this subject. Every time it came up, we would just have these enormous threads, like 100 comments and stuff like that. And I just realized that this was a great subject to make an online mystery about, because there's just so much to talk about.
I noticed the tagline that you had, that science is real, the story is fiction, and the truth about space is unknown.
Right.
Which kind of ties that all in quite nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And do you think that kind of by combining or moulding fiction with fact, that will bring a different element into the game for people? Because people can kind of learn, can't they? It's almost like an educational experience as well.
Well, it's not, I definitely think it's mind expanding. I don't think of it as educational. You're going to learn new words, and you're going to get like an emotional relationship to the universe, but it's not education in any way. It's more about making a bigger experience. I think it's also about, we're really we're asking people to pretend it's true. And that's an old role-playing trick, right? You're pretending that this is true. But suspending disbelief when you're actually having to chat about something, that's quite a lot to ask of your audience. If you're watching a movie, you can just sit there and watch it. And you know how irritating it is if a phone goes off in the cinema, or if somebody's eating popcorn too loudly or whatever. That's your suspension of disbelief disappearing. And we're asking much more than that. We're not just asking you to watch. We're actually asking you to discuss it as if it was true, even though you know it's not true, because we're not hoaxing anybody. And I think the science is really great for that, because what happens then is we have these fictional characters. We have Kathleen, the young scientist. We have Max, the DJ and the electronic musician. And we have Thomas, the internet journalist. And they are fictional, but the things they're encountering are real. And you can start linking to Wikipedia articles about subatomic particles and the birth of the universe, and that's what people do. And that kind of collision between something completely true and something completely fictional that works together, that really helps to suspend disbelief. That makes it, to put it simply, you don't feel like a twat, even though you're chatting about something that you know is not true.
Yeah.
Because it's real, and the science is real, and we've gone to great lengths to make sure that the science is real.
Do you think then that this kind of idea of storytelling and gameplay coming together, with video games becoming sort of more and more popular and acceptable really as a form of entertainment, as the original video gamers kind of grow up and become sort of the older generation, so to speak, do you think that this format of sort of interactive storytelling within gaming could become as popular as watching a generic movie or watching TV?
Well, I hope so. I know that we and I very much have the feeling that we've discovered something. And basically, we've been looking for it for 10 years, which is basically how do you tell a story on connected computers? Because that's what society is all about now. It's about people using network computers to work, to play, to fall in love, to maintain their family relations, all these things. They don't exclusively use computers, but they do it a lot. We all do it a lot. And, what's happened through history is that stories have always followed technology. So movies are really born out of the steam engine. That is an industrial art form. It's electricity, it's chemistry, it's fine mechanics. The movies are born out of the industrial age. And novels, they're about this thick and they on the bookshelf. That's some 100 years earlier. That's another age of storytelling. They don't disappear, but they reflect a certain time in society. And we've really been looking for how do you reflect the life we're living now? And we think this does it. It may not be perfect yet, but we're working on it. We've got the next one running up.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit then about your team. How many people have you got working on Cloud Chamber?
Well, that's a flexible question. It goes like this. The core team is actually only 5 people. And that's me and my creative producer, Mikkel Thomasen, and we have an executive producer called Vibeke Vindelø. We have a marketing manager and so on. And but when we were shooting the film, we were about 75. And the computer game team was about 20 people at the height of it. Right now, I think there are about 6 in the finishing run. So what we do is it's our idea and our concept and our story, but we then work with freelancers and game companies and film talent and so on, and bring them in when they're necessary. Having a large programming team is not what we're best at.
Mm-hmm. How did you find that then, going from being sort of quite a small team to suddenly having to incorporate people from the film industry and actors and the like? How did you find combining that?
Well, we've been practicing for some years, but I have to say that's a real challenge. Film people and game people and documentary people are very, very different, and they speak different languages. They have different priorities. They want different things from life. They hold meetings in completely different ways. They finance their stuff in different ways, and they structure their work in completely different ways. I mean, hardly they're not even up at the same time. So that's really the challenge, I think, going forward. What we ended up doing was, we started off by putting them all in the same room and hoping they would work together. That doesn't work. It may work in 10 years, but right now there's just an enormous difference. Computer game artists are a little bit like playful engineers. Mm-hmm. They're like, they're building stuff and picking it apart and rebuilding it and so on. And film people are all, they're performance people. The whole film industry is structured around leading up to the moment when the camera is turned on, and then leading down from it and using what you brought home. And that does not look like the prototyping process of gaming at all. So that's the biggest challenge. That is to get, really good and talented people to do their best work while, interfacing what they did with the people from the other medium. Mm-hmm. Because here we have the things coming out of the actor's mouth has to fit with what's written in the 3D interface. And every time you make a change to the concept, we've got a new, better idea on the game side, we have to go back and revise the script. Mm-hmm. So, that's like a circle you keep running, but that's also the most fun in the whole world, if you ask me. Getting to work with film people and game people and documentary people and just keep going around and building it, that's a pleasure. That's really good. But it's a new challenge when you're, suddenly you have to speak 3 languages instead of,
That's sort of multitasking to an extreme, isn't it, I suppose?
I don't know if it's that extreme, actually. I mean, it sounds worse than it is, because just making a film or just making a game is actually the same thing. I mean, if you're just making a game, you're going between the level designer and the screenwriter and the coders and there's like 10 different posts on that, and they don't really speak the same language either. The game designer sees the game in a certain way, and the screenwriter sees it in a different way, and so on. It's the same on a film. The editor and the cinematographer, they don't necessarily see the film in the same way. The director's job is to talk to all of them, make sure everybody's on the same page. So this is like a zoom out. Suddenly you've got not only that, but you've also got another cluster, which is the game, the film, and you have to circle between them, and then you have to make sure the circles inside the circles are working. That's fun. It's like spinning plates. You just got to keep spinning.
Keep them all going. Yeah.
Yeah, but when it works, it's a beautiful thing, because when you then when you're finally bringing things together and you can feel them meshing, and you can feel that things she's saying in the film are working with the way the interface is structured, that's good for you.
A big achievement, and congratulations on managing to get everybody to work together to achieve that. It's quite. We've
been spoiled on this one. We've had so many good people. One of the breaking points was when Vibeke Windeløw stepped in. She used to produce movies for Lars von Trier, and she'd never made anything like this before. I came to her and said, "So, do you want to make a mystery on connected computers?" And she was like, "No, definitely not. I make movies." But we talked, and she kind of fell in love with this sort of documentary space particle aspect of it. And we started working together, and working with a person who can call up a Bond villain. We have Jesper Christensen in it, who was Mr. White in Quantum of Solace. And she called him up in Japan at 2:00 at night, and he picked up the phone and he goes, "I only picked this up because it's you." And she goes, "So, you want to be in a mystery?" And it turns out that he's really an artist. "We can't pay you much." "Yeah, okay, I'll be there. Let me look in my calendar." When that started happening, the whole project just took off, because suddenly we could get A-list cinematographers. We got the people behind The Killing, Fabian Wullenweber, the director of the film clips, and the game part, and everything just, went up a few levels. And that's just we've been so spoiled in that way. It's really been a pleasure.
So now that after going through all that process and being able to look back at sort of the end result now, are you happy with how the sort of storyline developed and with the acting within it?
Very much. I must admit that I think for an indie game, this is quite an expensive project. But from a film perspective, this is dirt cheap. So yeah, I'm really satisfied with what we've been able to do. We've done so many new things, and we've been able to, I think, lock them together in a really good way. Could you ask me that again 10 days after the launch? Because that's going to be the big one, right?
Yeah.
How will the global audience deal with a crowdsourced investigation? We're all going to be watching. That's the big one, isn't it? We're going to be looking into this community and seeing how people treat each other and how they treat the mystery and all those things. That's going to be just fascinating, because this is, in that way, it's not like a normal game or a movie, because it's only just beginning now. We just supplied, the playing field. What the players are going to do with it, that's going to be the big thing.
And you can see it kind of playing out in real time as well, can't you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we've also, it's very clear from the previews that a lot of people in the gaming industry are very worried about how the community will behave. Because there is a lot of bad behavior out there. But we've made 3 of these, and we've never had that problem. And I think there's a couple of reasons. One is that we've designed it specifically so that bad stuff sinks. So, things that are downvoted will just disappear. And that's a big thing. So you may see some destructive behavior, but pretty quickly it'll disappear. The second thing is that what we've observed, this is kind of emergent thing, is that it quickly becomes like a club. So the people who are actually investing time in taking it seriously, they're not going to take kindly to some punk who comes in and starts, writing graffiti on the walls.
Yeah.
You're going to get reported for abuse like that. And that's easy. Then you get banned. So, the community quite quickly starts to take care of itself. And that's a big, important thing. And I think that's also the big challenge going forward, is really getting those gameplay mechanics to the point where it's completely self-contained. And we're going to be watching carefully. But the goal is to make it so you can let go and it'll just keep going.
It's like a community judgment, isn't it? Really. Which, it again, brings another element into it, isn't it? That kind of community feeling and going forward. Do you think then, because of the sort of the concept of the game, where a puzzle is being unravelled, so to speak, is Cloud Chamber going to sort of continue to puzzle players as they explore it over the coming years, or do you think that once it's been solved, it will kind of lessen the experience for gamers sort of coming later on to the scene?
It's never going to be solved. Trust me. No, it's not that simple. But Facebook doesn't really get tiring because people keep bringing new stuff to it. And the next thing that happens, the same with Reddit. The thing is that the old stuff decays. So if you're coming in a year after launch, you're coming in with the people who are coming in at the same time as you.
Yeah.
And the people who were there a year ago, I mean, nobody wants to scroll down for 30 minutes to look for an answer. I mean, at least I don't. And if they do...
There'll be one.
If they do, that's good detective work, perhaps, I mean, that's okay. So I think, again, it's a question of tweaking the algorithm and deciding what kind of decay should we have on the posts, and should they disappear completely, or should you be able to keep going down? I mean, it would be very simple for us to say anything older than a month just disappears. So, if you do that, then you have to reinvent it every month. And if somebody is an old hand and just wants to keep it going in and put in the right answer, well, if that's your game, then go for it. I mean, so I guess the big question is, are there spoilers in there? And the answer is no. I mean, we put a lot of effort into this. The whole thing is written, filmed, shot, edited without spoilers. You're never going to find a note that says the butler did it.
With the lead piping in the dining room, yeah.
Right. Mr. Purple or Plum. So the trick is that there are very definite answers to all the questions. Who killed Ingrid? What is the signal? What happened to Kathleen? Is she lying? But they're there between the files. So if you look at this specific diary page and you look at this specific piece of found footage where they're on the roof and the particle storm is coming down, and you look at this diary her mother wrote 40 years ago, if you put those three together, then you'll know what happened. But that's a discussion thing, right? It'll never be more than your theory, and the satisfaction is in other people thinking, that's a good theory. I buy what you're writing. That's where the real emotional satisfaction is. But at the same time, of course, there is a dramatic curve. But there's no butler, at least not written down. But I know what happened.
How long do you think then, on average, I mean, you might not know the answer to this, because I suppose it depends on how much people talk about it, but how long are you expecting the gameplay to sort of go on for?
Well, we did a beta test in last year, and core players were spending around 25 hours on it. So that's including discussion. There's about a feature film's length of film footage in there. There's video diaries. There's several hours of documentary footage. There's written journals, emails, diaries, all that kind of stuff. And if you put the discussions on top of that, then 25 hours is not really that much. And we've changed some things since, so I would actually expect that to go up. I would expect that people who really get involved in the discussions will be spending up to 50 hours in there, no problem. Because we've made it much easier to keep discussions going. So you don't have to travel around. You can just keep tabs of the discussions you're involved in. And I think that's going to get people to go much deeper.
So there's plenty for people to get their teeth into then?
I'm sorry?
There's plenty for people to get their teeth into then?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
teeth.
I know you're coming up ready for launch soon. When can people sort of get their hands on it? And where can they buy it?
They can only buy it on Steam. So it's on the Steam store, and we're launching at the end of July. and I don't have the exact date, but it's pretty close to the end
We're
of it.
nearly there.
We're so close. We're just, what they say in games is that the last 2% just take forever. Because those last things, you're just crunching them. And that's where we are now.
So if you're watching this in August, it's already out. Go and buy it.
Right?
And what's the price? What's it marketing at?
We haven't actually announced it yet, but it's going to be around $20.
So for the amount of gameplay you're going to get, that's a very reasonable price.
I think. Yeah, we thought that, some people told us we should take more, but this is new. We don't want to, set a high barrier of entry. We want people to try it.
And where can we find out about Cloud Chamber on the interwebs?
We have a Facebook page that we upload a lot of stuff to. Cloud Chamber Mystery on Facebook. We have cloudchambermystery.com and on our Steam page.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I know you've got lots to get on with launch coming up. Being very busy, so thank you very much for taking your time to talk to me today.
Okay, thanks a lot. Take care.